Joining me now is Jared Bernstein, former chief economist to Vice President Biden, and he's now an MSNBC contributor and senior fellow with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And Douglas Holtz-Eakin, president of the American Action Forum and former director of the Congressional Budget Office. He was an economic advisor to John McCain in 2008. Thank both of you for coming on the show. Doug,
thank you.
Doug, let me start with you. Are Boehner's ideas really the right way to get the economy going?
Well, he's certainly talking about the right topics. I thought one of the most interesting things about his speech was he was talking about tax reform. The president is on record as wanting both individual and corporate tax reform. He was talking about regulatory reform. The president devoted a fair amount of time in his speech to his efforts to roll back 500 regulations that are excessive. And so far they've only rolled back one, but, you know, they're talking about the same things. And Speaker Boehner talked about the debt crisis, and certainly the president has said that he's going to send up real proposals to finally deal with the burgeoning debt crisis. So they're not far apart in the kinds of things they're choosing to address to get this economy going. Where there is a big difference is on tax policy, particularly in the near term, and on strategies. The president continues to rely on a temporary, which is pretty weak policy, no permanent pro-growth reforms. And he also relies too heavily on targets that get picked in the West Wing for reasons that are never clear to me. So the president's got a temporary targeted policy that I think ultimately is going to disappoint. The speaker's talking about the same problems with a much stronger impetus.
Let you jump in here. Sure. I mean, can this really work? And saying they're not that far apart, the president is saying Social Security is not on the table because it has nothing to do with the deficit. The speaker's saying taxes is not on the table. That seems like they're far apart to me.
I mean, to listen to Doug and to Speaker Boehner, you'd basically think, we must be doing okay. We got a low unemployment rate. We just have to worry about our long-term growth perspectives and kind of pursue the same old agenda that these guys pursue, whether the unemployment rate is low or high, whether the economy is growing or shrinking, cut corporate taxes and deregulate. Let us not forget a couple of things here, Al and Doug. It was precisely that roadmap that had a couple of very, very detrimental effects on the middle class, on the poor, and on this economy in the 2000s. We had the worst decade ever for middle-class income growth. It was a lost decade. We had the worst decade ever for poverty. We went from budget surplus to budget deficit. We had a terrible, as you heard Bernie Sanders say, a terrible decade for job growth. This is precisely the roadmap, deregulate, cut taxes, that got us into this mess. And the idea that we're sort of comfortably talking about going back there is patently nuts. What we have to target is the unemployment rate. And interestingly, Boehner did say one thing.
The same one that you targeted to keep at 8%, Jared?
The one thing he said that would help was infrastructure. You actually heard Bernie Sanders say that, too. There may be some agreement there. All the other stuff is long-term conservative agenda that has proven to fail every time.
What's wrong with that?
Jared, let's remember, we've had, Jared's just given us this litany of woes, but we've had under this president's watch the 3 worst years since the Great Depression. In fact, the only way to defend his policy is to say they're better than the Great Depression. That's the defense the White House offers every time. Let me finish, Jared. You're the person who said these policies are so good the unemployment rate's not going to go over 8%. These policies don't work.
Are you saying that this recession is Obama's fault? Is that what you're saying?
The 2011,
that the Great Recession
we have been growing for 2 years. 2 years since the recession ended. Two of the worst years on record. They are the president's. The president said he owns this economy. The president does, and the policies haven't worked, and he's going back to the same broken status quo that has left us facing a sovereign debt crisis, facing an absolutely unresponsive economy.
Jared, Doug, he asked you, are you saying that President Obama is responsible for the recession?
No, he inherited the recession. We know that. And I was on the Financial Crisis Commission, and Jared knows there's a very nuanced explanation for the recession.
No, you're right. You're right.
No, and since the recession was officially declared over, we have had dismal economic performance. And the notion that we're going to do again what led to that performance is really quite mistaken.
But is the answer...
Okay, let me address that.
Jared, is the answer then to do what got us into the recession? Look at what Boehner's saying about
that's
taxes.
Not what got us into the recession.
This is my point.
I want to show this clip, and I want both of you to respond. This is what Boehner said about taxes, and these are the policies that led us into the recession, in my opinion.
You're wrong.
Tax increases, I think, are off the table, and I don't think they're a viable option for the Joint Committee. If we want to create a better environment for job creation, politicians of all stripes can leave the my way or the highway philosophy behind.
Now, that's a 9-minute gap where he takes total opposite position. How do you negotiate with someone, Jared, that takes one position and 9 minutes later another position?
Look, all day long, Representative Boehner has been saying taxes can't be on the table, revenues can't be on the table. And by the way, and Nancy Pelosi, somewhat to my surprise, said you can't begin these negotiations without revenues on the table and entitlements on the table. So she's trying to do what the president has done, which is to come to the table with an open mind. You simply can't achieve a sustainable budget deficit simply on the basis of spending cuts alone. Now, let me go back to a point that Doug has very deeply wrong here. You are absolutely right, Doug. The president inherited the worst recession since the Great Depression. Then, because of the Stimulus Act and the action of the Federal Reserve, an economy that was falling off a cliff was then growing again, as you correctly pointed out, starting in mid-2009. Since then, it's been stuck absolutely in neutral. And what we need now is to build on the we need to build on the programs that got us here going forward.
They didn't get us here.
We can have, gentlemen, we can have our different views, but we can't have different facts. Look at the graph, Doug. The fact is that hold it. These are facts. You saw the reduction and the effects of the stimulus that brought us up after going down. I mean, these are facts. You can't argue with the fact that this economy had shrunk, and when we went into the stimulus, the economy grew.
And how much of that growth is the private sector? Jared can't answer that question. There's no credit given in that in any of that graph. So what did? No, you can't. You cannot know.
Answer the question.
You cannot know.
Almost two.
You cannot know.
Since March, Doug, you asked me a question. Since March of 2010, there have been 1.8 million private sector jobs. March of 2010, there have been
how many of those would have been created without the stimulus program? That's the question, Jared. How many would have been created?
According to the Congressional Budget Office. According to the Congressional Budget Office, between 1.5 and 2.5 million. According to the Congressional Budget Office, which I know you believe because you used to direct them.
No, I don't actually. There is no data there. There's no data there.
You don't like facts. You don't like facts, and you don't like analysis.
I'm going to bring you guys back.
You don't like facts, and you don't like the analysis.
Just a second.
So the basic strategy is you guys just yell so that guests don't get the answer.
You don't like the analysis.
Hold it. We're going to have to bring you back. I like a good debate on substance, but we've got other guests. Jared and Doug, we'll be right back. Thank you. We'll be right back.